My name is Rob, and I am the founder of a tradition called Orglava, which is the pursuit of a modern expression of the ancient Germanic religion through the lens of the Pennsylvania Dutch culture. And people often say, "Oh, well, you're all Mennonites and Amish, your hats and everything." Well, yes, I did grow up Mennonite, but my mother was also from a unaffiliated Lutheran church because if you marry in too much in certain Mennonite communities, your family tree quickly becomes a family bush, and then you can't hide as much under it. So I grew up straddling the plain Pennsylvania culture and the fancy Pennsylvania culture, and um, and when I got to be in my 40s, I kept hearing the din in my ear of multiple deities doing that call that they do to many of us. And because I've always had some issues with balancing the whole concept of I am your loving God, so if you don't do what I tell you, I'm going to smite you, sort of thing. And just didn't make sense. But finally, in my mid 40s, early 40s, um, I was away on vacation, and I decided that that I was going to research this stuff. And so I went to the first religion I could think of that was polytheistic, Hinduism. And I just went to a bookstore, picked up the rough equivalent of like Hinduism for dummies, like Hinduism for beginners or whatever. And when I was reading that story, that book, the author was of Norwegian descent, and she mentioned the word Asatru. Look, let me go look at it. And then I go look that up and I'm reading it. I'm like, oh, that's a little closer to home. And then as I'm reading, I'm like, wait a minute, hold on a second, wait. And then that's when all of a sudden it's like the revelation's over. Like, oh, all those helpful entities from our healing practices, those are our old gods, but we still call upon them. And it all of a sudden it made sense. It's like things that were framed in a less offensive healing tradition aspect of being helpful entities such as the goddess Hola and the god Dora Thor, the god Buran, Odin, and from that stemmed our tradition. The sun is right in my face here, so I'm gonna move forward. And probably losing the camera, and so then in 2008 I began the the folklore research project, which I am a trained Braucher. Braucherei is it's called powwow by the English speakers among us, which a lot of people say is it taken somehow from an Narragansett word. It's like no, where I think it actually stems from is the way that a Pennsylvania person with a thick Pennsylvania Dutch accent says the word power in English. He has the powwow, and and but that is our traditional healing practice up until around World War One. That was the primary medicine system for the Pennsylvania people, even out here. And and then the efforts in World War One was a real enemy to the Pennsylvania people, not because we were not on the side of the United States, but because people didn't understand our culture. We were still mostly unassimilated, and you could cross most of Pennsylvania without having to speak English, and it worried a lot of people that we were a fifth column, and um, and we weren't. I mean, most of our ancestors had never even seen Germany since there was no Germany when they left there. It was the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation, but it was not Germany. And so you know, we are distinctly a European culture that took root here as the first massive group of refugees to leave Europe and arrive here. We were not colonists, we were not colonizers, we were refugees. Um, Refugees primarily from the 30 Years' War and the 7 Years' War. But we brought with us all sorts of traditions that managed to take root and live on. And so in 2008, when I began this folklore research project, I was interviewing elderly practitioners of our healing and our magical systems, and began to turn up a lot of lore. Then somewhere along the way, a few years later, it dawned on me that mostly because they were self-excluding, but the people who identified as Hektarai practitioners, Hektarai literally means witchcraft, um, were not really participating, and that's partially because of the stigma that was attached to that practice by um,
by the Pennsylvania establishment, and there is such a thing, believe it or not. But so what does that mean exactly? Well, um, depending on where you grew up in Pennsylvania country, the Daisarai as we call it, and your the variant of it, Braucherei and Hexerai are the same thing. You know, where they could just be two sides of the same coin, or they could just be one coin, just by two different names. Where I grew up, there was a distinction where they make it, Hexerai is evil and Braucherei is of God. Well, being a good org lover and being a good, polytheistic heathen, they decided, you know what, we need to look at it from a more holistic way. I had to change my mindset on the way this functions because, first off, of the approximately, I say like maybe close to 200 people who identify as Hexerai practitioners who I've interviewed since 2007, 2008, only one actually even believed in Satan. Like, I mean, and didn't even, worship it or anything like that. This was not a satanic practice at all. It was mostly earth-based or, like, universe-based system, and some of them did call upon the old deities in the same context as Crawford did. But some of them also did have a little bit more of a relationship with that particular king, excuse me, with Hola and Bertha, two of the goddesses of the witches, as the Christian church used to call them. So bringing them into the fold really, really expanded our lore. And there were groups of people throughout the state. Some of them were able to connect having one common mentor, like, maybe 100 years ago or something, and then they split out because despite what some Christian Brackers will tell you, there are lineages within Braucherei and Hexerai. I mean, I know the 8 generations prior to me of instructor, but some of them weren't that easy to track. And the runic system is one that is particularly unusual because I found people in different parts of the state who didn't seem to have any connection, all of whom knew parts of this runic system, but nobody knew the whole thing. And the first thing I'm going to say is that our runic system, I would not even say is of antiquity, but it is definitely unique. And some of the people knew the symbols, but not the names. Some people knew the names, but not the symbols. Nobody knew 100% of both. We got about close. I got nine. Like there was like one who knew like was missing one symbol. That was one for the that makes a sound, the P, the equivalent of character. We had to reconstruct that one completely. But then we also had, we had some really tough ones. Kind of similar to the problem I have with the Elder Futhark is and one man who was trying to explain to me that there was a rune he called guile, which means horses, but he was using it with the I sound, but the symbol he was making was closer to the Amos symbol of the Elder Futhark, which makes an S sound. It was very confusing because the guy was using the same sound, the same rune for two different sounds, and I'll get to that when we get to that letter because there was a lot to go through. It took us about 12 years to get to a functional system, but the biggest part in all this is the fact that there are elements involved with all these things. The people are using these in healing. They weren't using them so much they were using them in divination, but it was mostly about healing. And I had a few women who, in one group, they were signing runic energies to each of the digits on their fingers, and then they would use those digits to exude the energy or to pull the energies in. So let me just this part I'm going to read you here. The heirloom healing Pennsylvania Dutch practice of Braucherei, also called powwow in English, and the related magical practice of Hexerai serve as tremendous folk resources for the heathen denomination of Orglover. Along the front line of the folk medicine for the Pennsylvania people, Braucherei was pre-Christian at its core and features overlays from Gnostic, Judeo-Christian, and Lenape tradition. The practitioner communities also retain large volume of oral lore in the forms of myths, superstitions, charms, etc. The Orglover movement arose from these living heathen traditions as well as from the wider Pennsylvania folk religion. Orglover features the heathen elements still living in the Pennsylvania culture, drawing much of its knowledge from Braucherei and Hexerai lore. And we are now working to make this knowledge more accessible outside of Pennsylvania. So
how we sing, right? That's at first for room, but it's pronounced roan, roan. Not room, like it does not say room, it's roan. The plural is the roan. And this is a term I often do. We just talk about the rune sets. We'll talk about the Urana. And by the way, I will. Well, if you come to our booth after we're done, if I didn't get this to you, I'll try to get it out to you. So the double O is pronounced like OW and Mo. So again, just for clarity's sake, there were very few respondents. None knew the names of all the symbols. There was some confusion over the same name being applied to two symbols, and I don't think it was in antiquity. But still, that does not mean it doesn't have value. So this is the earlier story. I've since come across a few other people at parts of this, but among the most unique rune utilizations that I encountered came from three elderly, 80-plus years old, self-identified Hexorite practitioners who did not seem to know one each other nor live near each other. In all three cases, they had associated each digit of their fingers with a rune symbol. The fingers on the left hand were reactive, and the fingers on the right hand were proactive, meaning this is your pushing hand, your pulling hand. The thumbs were used for opening, sealing, and clearing. The runes associated with a particular digit were not the same among them, but their descriptions of how they utilized the runes were very similar. I've utilized their method, which involves casting the runes from the digits while sweeping the hand over the client's body. It's very confusing. It can be very difficult, but once you master it, actually, I'm going to show this to you. Back. They had those two together. I'll be telling you. The runes apply to each one. We actually discovered it works better on the back of the hand. Trying to move it from the back. So it's put the energies on with the 12 elements and onto the hand. It helps with memory. These women didn't need it though; they were just doing it without the drawing on. I found it helpful to have the drawing on. And the colors also makes sense. So these elderly women were like I said, they did all the runes in the same order. We're trying to, and within my guild, we're trying to make it so we all have the runes in the same order, that they flow from, because that way it's easier for me to teach the apprentices what we're doing. So runes have definitely turned up within our culture in a lot of different contexts. We found the Engel rune carved in granary walls. We found the Hoggle rune etched into looms, and many of our hex signs, even some of the Christian establishments will acknowledge that many of the hex signs have their basis in runes. And the swirling swastika, which is probably the only swastika in the United States that actually survives because it was not it made it through the war without being associated with Nazism. And I'll show you a picture of that if you haven't seen it before. Is merely about the balance of rain and sun. But that's it. That it's based. It's a stylized photo based on the Sibula river. And thankfully, the Nazis didn't get hold of that. But as broken as the system is, people use these things. The practitioners who did use them a lot. And there's another one. This is a big thing. This is one of the most woo things about the Pennsylvania culture is our scarecrows. I know people who do this who aren't the slightest bit pagan at heart, but when you build a scarecrow, it's called a lumpaman in Pennsylvania Dutch. But there's a little ritual that is done. It's not that little, where you spiritually activate the scarecrow and he becomes a Butzaman. And the Butzaman becomes the father of this year's crop. And he's constructed from last year's crop.
And there is a ritual which you do, which you are calling to the plant spirits in the other realms, the ones that have gone beyond. And you're acting like it's very shamanic. I hate to use that word because it's taking it from another culture. We would say hexic. You're actually stepping out and bringing the plant spirits back. You're serving as a bridge, and they're waking up the plant spirits within the Butsuman. And you're using the Anbat rune. You're seeking the answer from those plant spirits. And this is actually a fairly widespread practice. If you'll see a lot of people in the world are doing it every year in February.
The fallen gods for rebirth.
It's the rebirth, yes. It's the answer. It's the answer is the plant spirits calling back to you, saying they heard you, and then waking up in the Butsuman, getting the answer from the Butsuman. Now, so here are our runes. Take these around too, and I'll be going around. That's our rune set. It is different from the other Futhark. You can see the influence. That's what makes me think it's not of antiquity. I think that somebody got hold of the runes like about 150 years ago or so, and was messing around with them, and then developed something that lived on, and picked it up. But it's the elements that actually make the difference. And the careful one we had to flat out was we just sort of because that was missing. So how we got here. Okay, like I said, well, some runes have definitely been known in Pennsylvania's culture since the migration. The full alphabet is almost certainly not of antiquity. Like I said, somebody about 100 years ago or so, I think, got hold and incorporated some of the knowledge. But with the suppression happening after World War II, that which we had in 2008 was really badly damaged. So here's the overview of the respondents. This is as of June. Total of 31 respondents contributed some input to the specific topic. Of those, 17 self-identify with Hexerai, 8 self-identify with Braucherai, and the rest did not claim an affiliation. Of those 31, 27 contributed something significant. Those 9 were the primary contributors of the forms. None knew all the names of the symbols. Of the 31, only 3 had a complement of symbols resembling Elder Futhark symbols, while others were similar to Zodiac symbols. We had some people who were filling in the blanks with Zodiac symbols. Only 2 had a nearly complete alphabet devoid of Zodiac symbols, and some of their symbols conflicted with each other. Everyone thought there should be a symbol for P or BB, because in Pennsylvania, 2 B's together makes a P sound, but no one knew the name of the symbol. Confusion over the same name, guile, horses, being applied to 2 symbols, that's what I was talking about before, which we reconstructed to be Angst and Iva, meaning a stallion and ewe. The runes tend to be drawn with more rounding and then with sharper points, particularly because they were usually written with the thumb of the person who was being interviewed. So then we have the 12 elements. The 12 elements: spirit, fire, ice, time, air, water, light, yeast, metal, venom, salt, and earth. Each one of these elements has a proactive and a reactive form, which are taken up by one of the runes. The inclusion of the 12 elements, each having 2 runes associated, arose from a cluster of 11 self-identified Hexerai practitioners. This is not when people think of Pennsylvania Dutch country, they don't tend to think of this region as being it. But this is probably one of the most old world areas of Dutch country that is not Amish or Mennonite. This is Northumberland, Columbia, and Montour counties, which are just below the Poconos. with 5 outliers in other states plus 1 in Ontario. One in Ontario, it does throw a wrinkle in the mix because their ancestors migrated prior to the revolution. And so some of these element things were going on prior to the revolution within Pennsylvania that got taken out to Ontario. The elemental system was inconsistent. Quite a few cited knowledge that there were 12, but they really didn't have the exact 12 listed. Like they knew there were 12, but I don't know if it was this or that. Keep in mind, many of these people are in their 90s. So I mean, I'm in my 50s, I can barely remember anything. So yeah. Of those who use any 12 elements, all but the one in Ontario ascribe to proactive, meaning they use positive and negative. I don't like to use positive and negative energies because negative sounds unwanted, but it's not. One's proactive, one's reactive, and they each have their strengths. You know, being proactive and acting. Sometimes you need to be defensive and reactive. Thereby linking one rune of proactive and one rune of reactive. The reason there's no neutral is because when there's no neutral, there's not an excess of either one. They're looking for excess when they're doing these passovers. They're looking for there's too much water energy. That's oftentimes edema. But in most cases, the proactive corresponds to pushing of the dominant hand, the practitioner, while the reactive corresponds to the pulling or the shooing hand. Now, the Northumberland County 3 associated the digits to the 4 fingers, as I mentioned before. And I have used this, and it was very difficult at first. It's getting easier the more I do it. But it does help me to have them drawn on. The first time we did it the way they did it, which they actually drew on their fingers on the front. But then you're wearing it down as you're going along. So we actually started drawing them in the back. I think that works a lot better. As the work on the system continued, I revisited the rune associations, and we found that aligning a proactive rune, on one hand with the reactive runes on the other hand really helped. They were kind of scattering around. And actually, one of them actually started doing that too. Then, this system does work. Let's see. Get this over here. All right, so here's some of the ailments that go with some of these things. If you have excess spirit, excess proactive energy of spirit, it often manifests itself in the form of manias, autism. Reactive comes out as depression and grief. Excess proactive fire could come as growths and boils. Reactive as abrasions. Proactive time, dementia, some types of scars. Reactive, Alzheimer's and other kinds of scars. Excess proactive air, and I'll make sure you guys get this in the video. Excess proactive air can be cough, sleep apnea. Excess reactive air can be asthma. Excess proactive water energies can be polyuria or edema, some sorts. Reactive can be kidney stones. Excess light, proactive light can be exhaustion or rheumatism. And excess reactive light can be like stress-induced, just general stress. Proactive yeast, some autoimmune issues. Reactive, bacterial and fungal infections. Proactive metal, some chemical abuse and bleeding. Reactive, bruising and deficiencies. Venom, some autoimmune issues, particularly ones that can be contagions. Reactive, viruses, microbes, and bites. Proactive salt, edema, hypothyroidism, reactive heat stroke, and hypothyroidism. Ailments of proactive earth or constipation, and reactive earth, diarrhea. Ailments of proactive ice, some autoimmune issues, particularly ones that slow you down, and sedentary tendencies, and reactive bone breaks and reduced mobility. So what you're doing is if you sense an issue of proactive ice, you could use reactive ice or the opposite of ice, which would be fire, to try to use that rune together to try to combat the ailment. All runes in Deitch, all Pennsylvania runes have an upright, a rect dog, or the deep dog, meaning workshop interpretation. You know, and on the Elder Futhark, runes like Issa don't have one, but on ours, I can turn up sideways, and that Okay, so our first rune. Feet. This literally does mean cattle, just like the Elder Futhark's Fehu. And it's missing one arm here, but this turns up in Germany on borderlines of Corral. So, which makes total sense. Much like the Elder Futharks, it represents portable wealth, moving assets. As wealth can spread, so can fire. So this is the element, and this is proactive fire. Afflictions of elemental ice may be used to combat, may be combated with these. So if you have ice afflictions, whether they be sedative, whether it be proactive or reactive, this can go after ice because it's the opposite. Some afflictions are old injuries that cause reduced mobility, reactive ice, atrophy from sedentary lifestyle, proactive ice, and even afflictions caused by reactive fire. So this can work against reactive fire and anything else. Make sense? Order has been was a tough one because this was actually really how much of an issue. We have a symbol going kind of the opposite of the order. Order is a prefix meaning ancient. This is the newer Greek deity associated with this with Polar, our god of death, or death personified. To me, it's odd that no name was passed down with this room, particularly since the vowel U and the vowel W, UU, are very common sounds in Pennsylvania Dutch. The Oxford maybe because of the fact that the old Oxford came from, I don't know, is gone itself. But ironically, the symbol is known for it, at least by a hexawide practitioner or two, but it was not widely known. Some of were writing it as like look like a capital U. It's been placed with proactive elemental salt, which makes it useful energetic healing for combating afflictions of time, such as proactive dementia or reactive Alzheimer's. The excessive proactive salt energies are associated with certain types of edema, and it's also a power rune providing energy, courage, and raw physical, psychic, and spiritual strength. Two other runes in the work. Duna. It makes the South D sound. There is no TH sound in Pennsylvania Dutch, except in some last names, where it makes it. And this looks similar to Duna literally means light. It means thunder, but it is also the Pennsylvania name for Thor. It's associated with reactive spirit elemental venom. It is a deterrent, vengeful, and reactive force. It's a spiritual venom. It can kill off invading forces on the mind, body, and spirit. Despite its reactive nature, it can be used preemptively. Most importantly, it is the fact that it is associated with Thyrsis. Thyrsis is a kind of giant, and Dora is half giant according to his Norse lore, and heir to his mother could be a giantess even in our lore. There is no specific reference either way. But there's a possible connection to one word in Deitch, Gooslaufer, or Twilight Walker, or Duskwalker, which is a dangerous creature, and that connection comes primarily through Grimm's analysis into Teutonic mythology. So, but the Gooslaufer, they are They are very dangerous. They're extremely powerful. People don't mess with them. They're cryptozoological creatures in Pennsylvania. Um, the root of proactive venom. This is reactive venom. The root of proactive venom is Iva. Next is Onfat. Okay. This is the one that really led to this is the one that really led to the concept. Was reacting this elderly woman who was activating her glutamon, what she was doing with her finger, and she was drawing it out. And when I asked her if she could draw it out with the pen, she couldn't do it because she was always doing it with her thumb. She like kind of sitting there, and she ended up drawing it out like that. As soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, "You're looking for the on-fight, you're looking for the answer, you're looking for the on-suit." And I was like, "Okay, this is probably one of the most widely spread living one among Raffarai and Hexroy who said they don't know what they're using. They just draw it out just a symbol that that's been passed down. This one probably is an antiquity because it's been going on for hundreds of years. Where I can tell, it turns up in every single corner of the Dykesbury where there was a Raffarai tradition for at least 100 years. In that context, the root is a medium propellant to the dormant plant spirits inside the Pennsylvania structure. And I already explained this. So Onfat is the root of proactive air. The immediate sense to me would be that reactive. You think it would be reactive since you're receiving the call back, but no, it's the calling act that actually matters. The root of reactive air is Geva, which is the exchange back. This reflects response. That the response is a matter of choice and will, among other circumstances. In other words, we can put the call out there all we want, but if the plant spirits don't want to respond, they won't. So it's that we're putting the call out to Geva, and when they actually answer back. Right. There's two natures, right or wrong. We can use the right. This is rise, this is wheel. And both have turned up in different places. But it refers to any type of journey, really. That being said, I've always said the involvement of a vehicle of some sort, otherwise it's walk. Like riding, usually a wheel, you kind of have to have some sort of vehicle involved. The ride, though, can also be riding a little tree or an entity, perhaps even light. Indeed, this rune is associated with proactive light. It refers also to great journeys. On a smaller scale, is the journey of one's life. On a larger scale, is the journey to the mill, which in old Alba imagery, when you die, you go to the mill and you get crushed. Like you go to Hola's mill, your soul gets crushed up and it comes out in a new form for its next life. Afflictions associated with excess proactive light include rheumatism and exhaustion. Proactive light is pervasive, so the rune can be used to combat almost any ailment. This one you can use in a lot of places. I picture it as riding to the rescue or targeting the exact site and beaming in. Reactive yeast ailments are also particularly susceptible to light. I always picture that like when they use the ultraviolet to kill bacteria, or so fungal infections and bacterial infections may be combated with rice. The deity association with this, which is still relatively new, is Shlum, our god of sleep, slumber, and all altered states, who happens to be the brother of the god of death. Good stories there too. And this was another one that was a little bit difficult. It gives us the ability to see in the middle of the night, and it can also make the difference between life and death. When I was a kid, my grandfather used to like to tell a story about how when he was out in the buggy when he was a kid, the snowstorm, the wheel broke, and they were stuck in the snow, and all they had was a tin of cookies and a candle that they were bringing back. They were able to light the candle,
take the cookies out, put the candle inside the tin, and the tin got hot and radiated just enough heat to keep the inside of the bungee cool. And so like I still in my car today carry like a tin of things just in case. Of course, in the summertime the candle melts, but it's just one of those things where you never like the simplest things can sometimes be the things that make a difference between life and death. But also, the simplest things sometimes are also like a miracle. It's just amazing. And so it's also life force energy within the self. For as long as the fire within glows, there was life within the body. The deity associated with this is the goddess Caesar, who, for those who are not familiar, has become better known in like Pan-Germanic heathen lore. But most of the lore is retained by Continental German, by Pennsylvania Dutch lore, as the undoer of knots. The Catholic Church did a great job of preserving her lore for us. Not that they intended to, but they did a great job by making her Mary the undoer of knots, and pretty much telling us what she was known for. But today's the 24th. What 4 days will be her feast day, and her feast day, I forget what year it was exactly, but there's a very nice story about how the Romans were trying to set siege to the city of Sizerim, and so they chose that day 4 days from now, which just happened to be their first feast day, so all the people were in the countryside for the festivities. So they say when the Romans arrived, they discovered that the city had 3 times the population that they were expecting it to have, and they got throttled. Of course, they eventually took it over, and that city is now known as Augsburg. But the lore there is one of my favorite stories. And to this day, some of Caesar's symbols are the symbols of the city of Augsburg. She's like, they saw her as the pine cone protecting, and the pine cone is indeed on the shield of the city of Augsburg. So, Kersa is associated with the proactive elemental metal. That metal is just that part of the thing here that holds the candle in place. It keeps it from burning beyond its bound.
Stand up just for a second.
You just want to be in the. You just want to be on the camera.
Exactly.
So let's see where we're here. It exerts itself forward. One would think that Kersa would be associated with spirit or fire, but the containment feature is critical. That containment, and it is metal that allows for the burning of a fire to be contained. It's also interesting to note that on the side of that rune of reactive metal is Mon. That there is an aspect of our bodies serving as the vessels for our soul. So it's like the way that the candle holder holds the flame, our bodies are serving as a similar vessel. So Kersa is proactive metal, and reactive metal is the Mon rune. And the two of them kind of pair up nicely, each holding the flame. That's holding a literal flame of candle. Our bodies are holding the flame of our soul. This room in all sorts of healing, but Kersa is particularly useful in providing issues of water energy, such as proactive polyuria and some forms of edema, and the reactive kidney stones. Kersa is also useful in dealing with metal ailments such as bruising and various mineral deficiencies. I'll talk about that some other time. Kersa is also useful as a booster for weakening long-standing ailments, such as or strengthening the body against ailments that have not been tended to. What's her time?
It's 1:55.
Okay, we have till when? An hour and a half, I think you said, right?
Yeah, I think so. So we have 35, and I don't know if there's anything that comes right after. So
We have a little time right here.
however long we want. Until the next one.
Well, at 2:30 they have Mambo Jamboree. He told me that we could go. He told me if we go past 1 o'clock, if you guys are in the chaos, keep going. And just keep adding to it. I know it's a lot. I always feel like I'm taking a fire hose and like squirting people with it. Most of it splashes away, but if you get like a little bit out of it, then
now that we can actually pass the file about to people, we'll do that. Yeah.
Speaking of which, that file still didn't download for some reason
Oh, really?
on mine.
If you give me your email address, or something,
Were you able to get it?
It didn't want to open, but I'm going to try opening it on my computer when I get
Okay, because it's a PDF.
home. Yeah, sometimes my phone
But it's
doesn't
a
always-
big PDF. I mean,
Yeah.
so,
So I'm like,
so now, within Orville, Kerza plays an interesting role. Now, remember I mentioned earlier about going to the mill and getting your soul crushed? In our concept, Kerza also will be associated with the time actually in the mill, being like the time where you're between death and when the soul comes up with a new construct. And so the color of this phase is pitch black, and Kerza is white, representing our higher self trying to find itself, making its way to the next life. We are partial soul rebirth related. Then Geva. Geva is the only rune in our alphabet that is a verb form.
Yeah.
And it looks just like Gavo. It's the only one that appears as a verb form. We have one prefix and one verb. And it's used freely in Braucheri and Hexeri as an exchange of energy style. It's most common among you to use seal working. People use this all throughout Braucheri, even a lot of the Christians not realizing the origins of it. Some of them will turn it to be crosses, but a lot are just going to be X's. It's common use to sealing. This is also the rune that represents the foliar or the foliarin, which is the English word I believe is the fetch. The Norse word is the filgia, the follower, the one that the part of the entity that attaches itself to your soul and guides you through your life. It literally means the follower. It's your soul's companion that kind of guides you through your life. I believe that the Anglo-Saxons have the word fetch for it, which is the same concept. The foliar may appear as an animal or a human spirit. This is where some people get their totem spirit concept from, but this is strictly a European tradition. Many traditions hold the foliar as the opposite gender from the physical self. Excuse me. But experiences with the foliar of various individuals indicate that that's not always the case. I think that the whole concept of gender is much more fluid than historically we've given it. Foliar is often a part of consciousness. That's the one that many people say not to do astral projection. That's what people say not to do a lot of. You can see what it's doing because it's part of your soul, but it's far more able to move around. So it is also seen as a guardian spirit. And it is also possible to lose one's foliar through evil or irresponsible actions. There are actually, there's curse lore. Lore is about people who were abandoned by their foliar, and then their lives just went to a complete crap act.
Got it.
In other words, because the foliar it may attach itself to your soul at birth or before birth, but it's still a living entity. It's also subject to wart or weird or karma, so to speak, within the Germanic concept, which is similar to karma, but Hindu karma, not exactly the same. Sometimes they'll abandon the body. The person's so evil, they don't want to fall under that judgment. So, like, if it's attached to you and you're doing one evil thing after another, so I'm abandoning this soul and going on. In other words, you gotta be pretty bad. You gotta be a pretty miserable person.
Yeah.
But they tend to appear like warning tales. Like, the one that I'm thinking of is that I actually heard as a boy from my mother's father, who he told us a story about a guy who used to bury moldy apples under top of good-looking apples to try to trick people into buying the apples. And he was trying to sell as many as he could. And that was just the start. There was like one little thing after another. There was cheating or stealing. None of them was major, but it was all just like so ignorant and so like it was so reductive of other people's honor that it cumulatively got to the point where the guy's foliar couldn't stand it anymore. It was like it was like nagging, mattering little things, but it was just
the fact that it wasn't like it wasn't
Well,
an
it's
honest mistake.
unambiguously bad.
It wasn't an honest mistake. It was he was doing it consciously, and so the foyer was just like after a while, he's like, you know what, this is impacting me. Abandon it. Then every single thing that the guy did to everybody else started coming back to him, and it was just, I gotta write that one out. That one should be in there.
Yeah, that,
At first, I was going to say a good visual would be, as an aspect of its warning symbol, would be the Mothman.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, it's a gross visual. It says, "Hey, something bad is going to happen." I look scary, but just trying to tell you something bad's going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, and that story, that was one of the some of the old folk tales and old folklore. That's the stuff that they would use to keep us in bed on Christmas Eve. Like, I mean, like, it's like you better do this or, but these things were like, this was the kind of thing that my grandfather used to pass down to us as like life choices, like life decisions. Yeah, sure, you can get away with it, but is it worth it in the long run?
yeah.
And if your folio abandons you, everything in your life is going to go right down the tube. And this was a Mennonite saying this, so I mean, like, this stuff turns up in weird places.
Karma bites you in the foot. Karma bites you in the end if you do enough.
I see, and we would say Vort bites you right in the head. And then, it doesn't even wait till the end. But and Vort, by the way, is the. For those who are not familiar, that would not be. Oh. I might need you to play Vanna White for a while. Let's play Vanna White for a while. These are similar concepts. And this is where the English word weird comes from. Because, like, you ever read Shakespeare, was it Macbeth or was it? Where they had the three weird
The Weird Sisters
Yeah,
are.
three weird
Yeah.
sisters. What?
It was Macbeth.
Macbeth, yeah.
Yeah.
And they kept on the three weird sisters. Oh, everybody read us. Well, they're all weird, It's like, well, no. But when odd things would happen, you would get your cosmic payback. Thank you. When you get your cosmic payback, people would say it's weird because it is weird. But then it ended up being strange over time. I mean, the two of these, karma and weird, are not exactly the same thing, but they're pretty similar. And since we are Indo-Europeans, they probably do stem from similar concepts. There's really not a whole. You can impact your Vort through your daily actions. Sometimes things are closed off, but there are certain deities that can actually work beyond Vort, namely the goddess Bertha. But that's too far off in the weeds if I go into that discussion. But Geva, the last room. That's the root of elemental reactive air, which is in itself an exchange. We breathe in oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide, which aids in the world around us. Gave us help in dealing with afflictions of proactive air, like sleep apnea. Among the reactive air afflictions that are associated with excess GABA energy or asthma. GABA, like Onvok, can aid in issues related to venom, such as proactive autoimmune issues and reactive viruses. We've not really talked about plant relations to the elements, but they exist too. The elements are to the runes, but with GABA there was one oral reference to some connection between this symbol and two birds, swallows and eagles. The connection is in the likely form of the bird's flight, but beyond that, I'm not sure. Additionally, ferns and lindens have also been associated with this role. The linden, I think I know. The linden, because the linden the linden has a tendency, even within Pennsylvania culture, has a tendency for association with government and communication between the governed and the governing. And it's almost ironic that Notre Dame Linden in Berlin is where
the German government. But next up is Ditch. Yep. So we have like four forms of this one. And this one that kind of looks like a backwards Wunyo is the one that we decided to use. While this one tends to carry meaning of joy and optimism, it also carries a meaning of be careful what you wish for, because it definitely applies to this room. Knowing what you want and how to frame it and how to express your desires is a conscious, deliberate action. Which, by the way, yeah, I always had an association between the Wunyo rune and the god Odin anyway. With both of which you want to be careful how you word things too. But Minch can help to bring clarity to an expression to the reception of the word. Rather than a complicated circumstance, one can draw a relationship between this rune and Rudon. Rudon or Odin. But Rudon and Odin, they're the same deity almost definitely, but our perceptions of Rudon are very different from the Norse perceptions of Odin. The reasons for this complication are many, but perhaps the most mitigating factor surrounds the lore, not of Rudon, but of two characters in Pennsylvania's lore, who at least some of his characteristics, Belsnickel and Santa Claus. Belsnickel is our Punisher who goes. This much of the Pennsylvania culture contributed to a few large things to the wider American culture: Christmas and Easter lore. Almost all the secular Easter lore came from the Pennsylvania culture. The Christmas lore, the secular Christmas lore, came primarily from two streams: the Netherlands Dutch of Upper New York and the Pennsylvania. And the whole Belsnickel thing, which continues to this day in Pennsylvania country, you got Belsnickel coming through like about a week or two before Santa Claus, and you don't want to come across him. I mean, he comes across dirty, hairy, smelly, and then he asks you questions. You got to answer. If you don't answer it, if you can't answer the question right, then you got to go for the lightning round where he throws these horse chestnuts out. You got to grab a horse chestnut while he's whipping your hands with hickory switches.
And I'm trying to remember the entity that falls under top lore.
Krampus?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Krampus and Belsnickel they have similar roots. Both turn up in Pennsylvania's lore, but Krampus is by far less so than Belsnickel. Belsnickel is one thing, but they are similar. Belsnickel is kind of like we see Belsnickel as being a composite figure that's rooted partially in Rudon as in his wisdom-seeking phase. He's looking around to see who among his people can answer his questions. Some of these riddles are not like what's black and white and red all over. I mean, they're like like serious philosophical questions, like things that little kids would be like, what? And then comes so if you fail in the intellectual round, then you go to the physical round, which is trying to get those chestnuts. And if you don't get the chestnuts, you used to be out. Like, that was it. You didn't get anything from you. When he came back in his wish granter phase, you didn't get anything. Nowadays, they make sure that you get something. Yeah, and the horse chestnut was your token. And the horse chestnut said that you passed the test. So I know kids used to go out selling horse chestnuts. Which, by the way, I think that Rudolph would have approved of. But now, Santa Claus or St. Nicholas has drawn influence from many sources, particularly Christian and Gnostic, over the centuries. It's very much an oversimplification to say that he is Odin or Rudon. He's a composite figure. But the fact is that there is an element of him within these composite figures. So a lot of Christians will be like, no, wait, yeah, he's St. Nicholas. Well, how many reindeer are hanging out down there in Anatolia? It's like I don't think you need to dress quite that coldly either, But so we go with the oversimplification to a degree, but Belsnickel bears some of the overlays with these. But the way we tend to see it, Belsnickel, Santa Claus, composite figures, but this is him coming back at his wish granter phase as Santa Claus. and giving the gift. Belsnicker's Secret of Wisdom. I extrapolate a relationship with the Kerzer in this case, too. The interaction of Belsnickel, whether it be an expression of wisdom or foolishness, could relate to aspects of game, like giving back and forth. It gets really, really complicated, but I gotta tell you that Belsnickel's a really nasty creature. I look back now and I realize that some of the Belsnickel came to our house. We didn't even know who they were. Like, I mean, some of them will identify as like my second cousins, but like they would go around town like.
Well,
Yeah.
it could have been worse. As a kid, he could have been shoved into a sack and taken to hell.
Well, that stuff kind of does happen. That's what, that's what Belsnickel does. Belsnickel and Krampus do the same thing. It's just Belsnickel just looks a little slightly more human.
That doesn't help.
Yeah, exactly. But Belsnickel comes and asks a riddle or math problem. That math problem is another favorite. A proper response is met with a small gift, often the horse chest, that may be set out to receive one's wishes when Santa Claus comes. There are variations of forms that are punishments for incorrect answers. That's where you get put in the sack. And the physical challenges lie for the horse chest. But its general parallel to the progression of the rune. It does resemble the rune of the Elder Futhark, though it's backwards. Keeping the warning of being careful what you wish for. This rune governs links and bonds among people, friends, family, harmony. Its murky, upside-down presence can indicate the opposite. It's a rune of proactive elemental yeast, which places it as an excellent rune to aid in remedying reactive yeast issues such as bacterial and fungal infections. It can also be used to combat ailments of light, such as proactive exhaustion and rheumatism and reactive stress. Ailments related to excessive proactive yeast are often autoimmune disorders, which may be met with the light runes of Bright and Suna, and its reactive counterpart is Angle. I don't know if we're going to get to it.
I left my phone. There's my chair.
2:13.
Here we go. Okay. Let's make it through. Watch.
When in doubt, we have the PDF.
Well, I gotta make sure that everybody else gets it, but all right.
Oh, that's I would say that's a variation of Isa, but
Hoggle is
Hail.
it's similar. Yeah, it's hail. Yeah, hail. Hoggle is probably the most. This one is definitely clearly a Pennsylvania rune. It is related to the Hoggle rune of the younger Futhark. But the first hailstorm of the year is considered transformational and protective, and definitely is associated with the goddess Hoggle.
Yeah, the bogus thing about living around here is we don't get hail all that often. So most years we don't even get a hailstorm.
Hola. It really means hail. A hailstorm. The hailstorm heralds impending changes or shifts, good, bad, or neutral, and the sage hailstones bring wholeness, protection, and banishment upon throughout the year. I was at a conference called Sacred Space down in Washington, in Maryland, it's actually near Baltimore, a few years ago, and it started hailing. And all the Pennsylvania Dutch people ran outside and like trying to grab the hail. It was like hilarious, But historically, refrigeration would have been problematic, so the stones would melt, and they would either be drunk, people would either drink them, or they would like keep the rainwater and use the water for something in their gardens. When refrigeration became more available, people began to save the stones throughout the year. There was no set removal time for save stones. I never kept them past the Yule tide of the same year in which they fell. Aspects of this tradition appear to be echoes of the Hoggle rune, which Pennsylvania Dutch has meanings that are similar to Hagalaz of the Elder Futhark and the Anglo-Saxon Hoggle. The structure of the Deitz rune looks more like that of the younger Futhark than of the Elder Futhark. However, it's just as frequently depicted standing like this as like this. This is actually more common on Pennsylvania textiles. Usually they look like rosettes. And then, like this, like that. And, but with their bases being in the actual room.
And that could explain that symbol on certain farm buildings as well.
Yes, I mean, that symbol's fairly common across many cultures. So I don't want to claim beyond our own culture, but yeah, even some of the Christians will acknowledge the fact that this thing is probably rooted, especially when it's on its side like that, rooted in the rune. Hoggle is a rune of proactive elemental spirit, which places it useful in dealing with issues associated with reactive spirit, such as depression, grief, and death, and elemental earth issues, often digestive orders, particularly the reactive type, diarrhea, food poisoning, parasitic infections. But see your doctor instead of just relying on you. But yeah.
Yeah, magic should never replace your doctor.
Important thing to note, though, is that she is the goddess in our pantheon who oversees cycles of life, death, and rebirth. She passes through her sister of death, but her consort is Holler, or Jaeger. Okay, that's good. See ya. Evan Jaeger, who is the personification of death. So, using her rune to be able to deal with that and to be able to confront that makes a little bit of a cycle. Evan Jaeger, by the way, means the eternal hunter. Death is the eternal hunter. And those are some great stories that we have in our system. I just wanted to do, I think I'm going to end here. I'm sorry that I didn't make it through the whole alphabet. And those of you who didn't get the PowerPoint from me, I'm going to ask you to write your name on this easel, and then I'll take it. Or write your phone number or your Facebook messenger. I'll contact you through there and send it to them. But did anybody have any questions? I'm sorry that we only made it halfway through, but technical difficulty.
It's interesting learning about a new runic system because I'm normally used to using the elder over the younger and the Anglo, but it's definitely interesting to learn a new variant.
I would say it's a variant of the elder. I think like I said, I think somebody got hold of the elder Futhark like 150 years ago, but then this whole I think the most important thing here is that elemental system of incorporating these elements and using them to combat different ailments against one another. I mean, it's a lot to memorize, and as a practitioner, without drawing on the back of my hands, I do have trouble with memorizing it, but the more I'm using it, the easier it gets. And it starts to take on a life of its own. Plus, it's kind of funny that it was as removed as we are from like the old European homeland. The Pennsylvania Dutch country did kind of become its own homeland in a lot of ways. I mean, it's we've been there for 14, 15 generations. Some of our land was traded fairly with a lot of pay. Some of it is stuff you still have to work out. And we live side by side with the land in a different form. So, if you have any other questions, please, is that our warning?
That's our warning.
That was our
Start
warning.
wrapping it up.
Okay. So, yes. So,
Good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.